Post-independence Nigeria. By the late 1950s, the British were rapidly accepting the inevitability of independence coming to one of their major colonies, Nigeria. Officers began to retire and return home to England, vacating their positions in Nigeria's colonial government. They left in droves quietly, amiably, often at night, mainly on ships, but also particularly the wealthier ones on planes. The British clearly had a well thought out exit strategy, with handover plans in place long before we noticed. Literally, all government ministries, public and privately held firms, corporations, organizations, and schools saw the majority of their expatriate staff leave. Not everyone left, however. Some, particularly in the commercial sector and the oil businesses, stayed. The civilized behavior of their brethren made this an acceptable development. While this quiet transition was happening, a number of internal jobs, especially the senior management position, began to open up for Nigerians, particularly for those with a university education. It was into these positions vacated by the British that a number of people like myself were placed, a daunting, exhilarating inheritance that was not without its anxieties. Most of us felt well prepared because we had received an outstanding education. This is not to say that there were not those racked with doubt and sometimes outright dread. There were, but most of us were ready to take destiny in our own hands, and for a while at least it worked quite well. This bequest was much greater than just stepping into jobs left behind by the British. Members of my generation also moved into homes in the former British quarters previously occupied by members of the European Senior Civil Service. These homes often came with servants, chauffeurs, maids, cooks, gardeners, stewards, whom the British had organized meticulously to ease their colonial sojourn. Now, following the departure of the Europeans, many domestic staff stayed in the same position and were only too grateful to continue their designated salaried roles in post-independence Nigeria. Their masters were no longer Europeans, but their own brothers and sisters. These bequests continued in the form of new club memberships and access to previously all-white areas of town, restaurants, and theaters. This account about the handover of power I have just provided is perhaps too wonderful to be absolutely true. History teaches us that people who have been oppressed, this is the language of the freedom fight, and it was a fight, are often too ready to let bygones be bygones. Clearly, it is more complicated than that. It was a long struggle. Having said that, I think most who were there would admit that when the moment came, it was handled quite well. One example that I will give to illustrate the complexity of that moment of transition occurred at the very highest level of government. When Britain decided to hand over power to Nigeria, they also decided to change the Governor General. They brought a new Governor General from the Sudan, Sir James Robertson, to take the reins in Nigeria. Now that Independence Day was approaching, a number of onlookers were wondering why there was a new posting from Britain and no provision made for a Nigerian successor. It became clear that Sir James was going to be there on Independence Day, and as it turned out, wanted to stay on as Governor General for a whole year into the period of freedom. One wondered how he was going to leave. Would it be in disgrace? Would he be hiding or something of the sort? It is now widely known that Sir James Robertson played an important role in overseeing the elections, or lack thereof, at independence, throwing his weight behind Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who had been tapped to become Nigeria's first prime minister. I remember hearing Azikiwe comment years later on those events. He was asked in a small gathering, why did Sir James Robertson not go home like the other people who were leaving? Azikiwe made light of the question. Well, when he told me that he was going to stay on, I said to him, go on, stay as long as you like. The laughter that followed did not obscure the great meaning of this statement. Later, it was discovered that a courageous English junior civil servant named Harold Smith had been selected by no other than Sir James Robertson to oversee the rigging of Nigeria's first election, so that its compliant friends in northern Nigeria would win power, dominate the country, and serve British interests after independence. Despite the enticements of riches and bribes, even a knighthood, we are told, Smith refused to be part of this elaborate hoax to fix Nigeria's election, and he swiftly became one of the casualties of this mischief. Smith's decision was a bold choice that cost him his job, career, and reputation, at least until recently. In a sense, Nigerian independence came with a British Governor General in command, and one might say popular faith in genuine democracy was compromised from its birth.